there's this brief kind of outline of the whole path in the Great Perfection teachings: view, meditation, and action. It shows the path to liberation, it shows the path to Buddhahood, and it also shows the cause of suffering, the way that we find ourselves entangled in one way or another. Because the view is just that. I mean, really, how vast is your view? And again, according to the Great Perfection or the Great Completion teachings, it's vast. But based on our view, what do? We meditate. Meditate, again, in Tibetan is the word gom. It means to grow accustomed to. So it's more than just this, discipline we do, somewhat artificially, it seems, crossing our legs or sitting in a chair, keeping our back straight, eyes down, all the wonderful practices of mindfulness and awareness. It's everything, all during the day. What we're dreaming about, everything is our view. And that's our meditation. So it comes out of our view. And then finally, action. So whatever we grow accustomed to, that of course produces our action. And action is by body, speech, and mind, meaning the thoughts that are generated, the words that we say, and the things that we actually do. So the view is the king. The view is what really underlies, you might say, all of that, or colors all of that, or actually creates all of that, you might say. There's this famous statement, I think it's from a Hindu statement, but nonetheless it works. It says, if a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are pockets. So we are fundamentally limited by what our view is. And it's also said in Buddhism that the vastness of the Lama's blessings is completely determined by us. It says if you go to the ocean and you have a thimble, you will walk away with a thimble full of water. If you have a cup, you'll have a cup full of water. If you come up with a tanker, good grief. And if you plunge into the ocean, you become the ocean. Because our nature is no different. Each one of us is a Buddha, but we're just covered up with lots of stuff. We don't see it ourselves. So this view is completely important. And also, with the bigger view, what happens? Well, for one thing, all of this becomes a Pure Land. It's said in Amitabha's Pure Land, Sukhavati, Sukha is bliss, or Dewa Chen in Tibetan. Dewa is bliss, Chen, great bliss, the place of great bliss. Why is it great bliss? Because everything there, it says even the birds are singing Dharma. The water going through the stream, the bubbles are speaking the Dharma. And everything is conducive to your further realization and practice. So the obstacles are gone. So with this vast view, and of course the Pure Land is not something that's, somewhere, although it says, because it appears like that to our limited consciousness, it sounds like it's 3 billion trillion light years away to the west. But of course, those are just words that are attempting to open our mind. It's right here, right now. What stops us from seeing it is just our own mental veils which are reinforced and made thicker by our moment-to-moment activities. So the greatness of the view is that not only all this becomes a Pure Land, but as one Chinese master said, with my realization, the whole world became a great big bowl of rice. And anytime I was hungry, I could just stick my face in it and eat as much as I wanted. So everything becomes conducive with that view, because even though we're not fully realized, but with that view, the things that are going wrong become purification instead of just meaningless suffering, become purification instead of just, other stimulants to do further negative. When we understand the vastness and the power of the mind, even in a conceptual way, it frees us because we're suddenly free to be ourselves because it's about mind. It's not about fitting yourself into somebody else's idea of who or what you should be or anything. You know, we're fortunate, I think, that the isolation of the Tibetans, although Tibet wasn't as isolated as we think from seeing like the movie Lost Horizons and Shangri-La, you know, the Tibetans closed themselves off, as did China. They attempted to, and as did Japan. I can't remember who it was, Matthew Perry, there's some American ship captain who, you know, broke the Japanese blockade of their own island to open them up to Western commercial activity and trade. The reaction of these great civilizations was to, you know, put themselves off because the West was pretty overwhelming. So the Tibetans did a similar thing. But before that, you know, the Tibetans really, I mean, Dalai Lama, Dalai is a Mongolian word. That isn't cut off from anything. The grandson of Genghis Khan, you know, so the Mongols conquered all the way from, they tried to conquer even Japan. You know, the word kamikaze, you know, it means sacred wind. It refers to a typhoon that destroyed the Mongol fleet as they were trying to invade Japan. So the Mongols conquered all the way from Japan all the way to practically to Europe. I mean, they conquered Russia for 400 years. So this tremendous, you might say, cosmopolitan empire. They tried to conquer Tibet. And the Tibetans, can you imagine, talked them out of it. That's a better job than the Russians did. But nonetheless, they said, here, you can run our foreign policy, basically, if you're speaking in modern terms. But we'll give you the Dharma. You can control and obviously have a lot of power and influence here, but we'll manage our domestic affairs. You can do everything else. And they went for it. So the Tibetans converted the grandson of Genghis Khan. So everywhere that the Mongols conquered, Buddhism went. And you could call it Tibetan Buddhism, but that's a little bit of a misnomer because there were Khotanese, there were Sogdians, there were all these Central Asian cultures and civilizations that don't exist anymore. But my point is that there's great learning with this. And the learning is helpful because it gives you confidence and gives you a vaster view. So many of these great figures in Tibetan Buddhism, you know, are revered throughout the tradition, no matter what particular tradition or sect within Tibet they arose in. And, you know, our own particular tradition with Jigten Sumgön, he's one of those. Tremendous personal story, but also profound insight. Developing the view shows us, it changes a lot of these traditional stories, because instead of just some sort of mythological kind of tale, it becomes an example of what's actually possible with us right now, the power of the mind. There are different degrees of realization, but still one can do all sorts of beneficial things. So we came across yesterday, part of the Losar, you know, there are lots of sort of spontaneous, kind of auspicious things that happen around all of this. It's always amazing, you know, when you get around one of these great lamas, they're really, truly wonderful things that happen. And, you know, you can be a very agnostic, skeptical, scientific type and say, well, that could happen for this, and maybe it's just coincidence, doesn't prove causation, and, you know, people can do all that stuff. That's fine. But when you hang around and these kinds of things happen again and again, these tremendously harmonizing, spontaneous, clear things. It's like when you have a dream, you know, there are dreams and then there are dreams. You can have a dream that's very vivid and somehow, you know, pointing at something pure. Or even in our lives, it's amazing how you can have really unbidden moments that can be tremendously significant to your life path. Completely uncreated, unsought, certainly unmanipulated, unmanufactured, like they say in Dzogchen, unfabricated. Our unfabricated mind, which of course we're running away from all the time. So, we had a wonderful rainbow yesterday morning. I don't know if any of you saw it. How odd to have a rainbow in February, and how odd to have a rainbow basically at dawn or just after dawn. Tibetan New Year, how auspicious. And then happened to stumble across a text, a couple of things from Jigten Sumgön. It's amazing. He's such a revered figure within, you hear the Dalai Lama refer to him, for instance. But yet, we haven't had too many teachings, although our prayers are generally from him. His actual teachings, his greatest teaching is the Gonchik, which is an obscure kind of text because it's just all these different statements. We could have someone teach on it sometime. Gonchik means one taste, basically. And his teachings were that all these Buddhist teachings work for you in whatever mindset you're in, in whatever level of understanding you're at. But the greatness is that it's all one taste. There are no preliminary teachings. There are for, provisional reasons, but absolutely, all the teachings are absolute. And so this is the great Pure Land where everything works for us. And instead of resentments and bitterness, when difficulties come up, suddenly they become, the path. So he gave several teachings. I'm going to read a little bit from this morning, be a little bit briefer this morning because we have New Year's things to do. Basically, the great smoke offering, which is a great method of purification, even just sitting through it, let alone the imagery and the visualizations, the mantra, whatever you choose to do. And then finally, the Zambala practice. Zambala is a manifestation, an appearance of the Chenrezig Sig of Avalokiteshvara, the great Bodhisattva, Buddha of compassion. It's the special manifestation that creates benefit and wealth. So it's very popular in lay communities, of course, because we all need wealth to pay the rent and food. So it works that way too. But again, with this great motivation of liberating all. But nonetheless, this couple of brief teachings from Jigten Sumgön, parts of which I read yesterday too. The basic teaching, though, is that all appearances are one's own mind. This is the view that turns everything upside down. We think we're all conditioned. We can't help it. If you're born here as a human being, this particular world cycle and this particular historical time, and even all the cultural things of, our own civilization, you in your milk, you get certain conditionings. We have a very scientific age, and why not? You look at what's been produced by this, all the medicines, all the asphalt, all the ease. I mean, my father was born in suburban New York, in northern New Jersey, on a kitchen table. That's like 1923. That's, I guess 100 years ago now, but it's amazing the development. I mean, every time I see people going to the moon or sending something to Jupiter, I don't understand how you do that. But let alone the railroad. The car. We all know the progress has been unbelievable, but not mentally. So we have this conditioned idea that mind is the product of our brain, right? That's the assumption. Every time we go to the doctor, go to the psychiatrist, everyone's thinking like that. No one's examining that, but they're thinking like that. And because they have that view, that's the result they get. It's like, I don't know what the term is, but you get things reinforced as you see them, but it's your bias that's doing that. Thank you. Self-fulfilling prophecy, or confirmation bias is another one, yeah. So, but the Buddhist view is upside down. Mind has created the brain. And you can see how radical that is. And how did the Buddha start his teachings? I mean, think you're sitting under a tree, you've gone through 6 or whatever years it was of this intense kind of striving that he did and sacrifice. I mean, walking away from his kingdom and his family, unbelievable. The obligations in that society especially, it's just unheard of. So you come to great awakening, you come to omniscience. How do you communicate that to other people? People just lost in their own personal dramas and their societal hatreds, their tribalism, all of these things that we know about. So he started with the first noble truth. All of this conditioned existence is suffering. Whoa. So as long as the brain is producing the mind, that is suffering. And the Buddha turned that upside down. He found the cause of suffering. And suddenly the mind is the king. The mind is producing the brain. The mind is producing all of this. It's hard to accept. And even most people who, like certainly Western Buddhists, they haven't even thought of it like this. We're looking for a little bit of therapeutic peace in our mind, maybe. So Jigten Sumgön was teaching on all appearances are one's mind. The river Ganges is seen as nectar by the gods. It is seen as water by humans. And it is seen as melted copper, snot, and blood by the pretas, the hungry ghosts. The river Ganges itself remains unchanged. The appearances depend on the individually accumulated karma and perceptions. That's so liberating. We know now, I mean, the cutting edge of evolutionary science, for instance, is understanding that what we are seeing, I mean, we know, for instance, that bumblebees, they see ultraviolet light, ultraviolet radiation. They see it. We don't. What do we see? We have evolved. This is totally scientific in a way that we're getting limited information from whatever reality is, limited information that allows us to survive and procreate. Fitness, it's called in evolutionary science. Everything is just about fitness. It's not about truth. There's a limited kind of truth there. If I hear a lion roar and I stay away from it, well, I'm get a chance to survive better. But again, the Ganges, it's a lake of nectar to the gods, a river of nectar. So, the Buddha, Maitreya, the Bhagavan, Maitreya. Bhagavan just means the world-honored one. And Maitreya said in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, Uttara means the highest, like beyond. Tantra is these special teachings of like using stuff to get enlightened, not just staying away from stuff. And Shastra means a commentary. So in this particular text, this appearance of the Buddha, though completely free from concepts and unchanging, fully benefits beings through his deeds. That this appearance is their own mind, ordinary beings do not understand. So he gives one other example. The Buddha taught the perfection of wisdom teachings on a mountain, a hill you can go to today in Rajgir, India. And it's said that he taught the perfection of wisdom and the Amitabha Sutra there. And it's said in the past, when the Bhagavan, that's the Buddha, taught the Prajnaparamita, that's the perfection of wisdom, at Rajgir's Vulture Peak Mountain, seated on a lion throne. This great billion-fold world of endurance, that's our world system. It's called the Saha world, the world of patient endurance. And isn't that how all of us live? This patient endurance that we just keep going on. But that appeared at that time rather like the world system endowed with lotuses, which is another Pure Land, but has a different Buddha, and everything is wonderful there. So as they were listening to him teach, it's like everything was transformed. Significantly at the teachings, when he gave this teachings on the perfection of wisdom, the vast view of emptiness, half of the monks walked out. And you can imagine how difficult it was for them to walk out, really, but they just couldn't handle it. Nonetheless, and Buddha Shakyamuni appeared like the Tathagata holy lotus, who's this Buddha in this other realm. The world system endowed with lotuses, however, was not transferred here. And this is it. It's all appearances are one's own mind. I'm going to go brief this morning because we have these other practices to do, but I wanted to read one example also from Jigten Sumgön about how this frees us up right now. Something called the embodiment of intention. This is why there's all this teaching on motivation, sentient beings, the intention. Why? Because the mind is king. And if your intention is vast, even in a dualistic way, even in this world where all of us is, all men are islands, even where we have that kind of seeming radical separation, you start to touch the vastness of the view just thinking about other people. And then if you're thinking benefit for other people, love is just wanting others to be happy. Compassion is wanting them to be free of suffering. It's even vaster. The vaster and vaster you go in that way, the vaster and the vaster the result for yourself. So, to give you an idea of the power, though, of this embodiment of intention, even though, we find ourselves, we think of ourselves as very much on the path and whatever, not realized, and all these kinds of ideas that we have. This is a story that Jigten Sumgön told. Just like a seal and its engraving. So if you have a seal and you punch down, you get a result, right? The engraving with a stamp. One takes rebirth as the physical manifestation of one's intention at the time of death. Whatever frame of mind one has when joining death, one takes birth as the natural expression of that intention. Previously in Varanasi, in the household of King Brahmadatta, there was a housemaid who gave birth to a son with an unknown father. Having been expelled and sent away by the queen, she had to traverse a dangerous river. Fatigued and unable to cross, the mother and child were both carried away by the water. The mother felt a tremendous sense of love for her son in her dying moments, and thus was reborn in the celestial realm of Brahma. Having taken birth there, like all divine children, she gave rise to 3 thoughts as soon as she was born. Where do I come from? Where have I been born? And what are the causes for being born here? Investigating from whence she came, she saw it was Varanasi, where she had served as a maid. Reflecting on where she was born now, she saw it was the celestial realm of Brahma. Reflecting on the causes that had led her there, she saw the immense loving kindness for her son in the moments prior to her death. With this insight, the divine child, with an apron filled to the brim with celestial flowers, red pearls, and so forth, tossed them down as rain at the riverbanks where the mother and the son had died. This is the nature or dynamics of phenomena, a nature known and seen by the Buddhas and by the protector of beings. One more story along these lines. So there are these 2 brothers, Shariputra and Maudgalyayana. Both of them were eventually became the 10 great disciples of the Buddha. They were 2 of the 10 great disciples. Maudgalyayana was known for his great psychic powers, especially, and Shariputra for his wisdom. Shariputra means son of Shari, and Shari, it means crows. Apparently there was this matriarchal lineage in ancient, like a tribe in ancient India. So they took the name of the mother, passing it down. So Shariputra and Maudgalyayana, they were 2 striving, young Indian men, and they were looking for an enlightened teacher. And they said, if you find one, let me know. We'll go together and become students. And that happened. So when we do our practices, there's often this Ye Dharma Hetu Prabhava prayer that's done. These are the words that were spoken to Shariputra. He was walking around Rajgir. He stumbled onto one of the Buddha's original 5 disciples, the 5 ascetics who abandoned him and then came back and came to enlighten with him in that first night of teaching. I can't remember his name, something with an A. But Shariputra noted this man and said, God, you look rather calm. You look rather spectacular. Who's your teacher and what does he teach? And he gives this Ye Dharma. Those are his words, his actual words to Shariputra. This is basically, I'm a student of the great Shamana, the great monk, Shakyamuni, who teaches cause and effect. So, once when Shariputra and Madhgalyayana went from village to village for the sake of beings, they came to a remote place where an ox was trapped in mud and had but a little time left to live. Shariputra pulled him out of the mud, scraped off the mud from his hide with a bamboo branch, washed him thoroughly with water, and then expounded a few words of Dharma. So what he's saying here are called the 4 seals. This is to be a Buddhist means basically these are the 4 things that you believe. All compounded phenomena are impermanent. All contaminated phenomena are suffering. All phenomena are selfless, and the 3 realms are empty. And then Shariputra said to this bull, dying bull, now feel happy towards me. Upon saying this, the ox died with a state of joy towards Shariputra. This became his poa, his transference of consciousness, and is the poa of skillful means, and not a poa performed with many sacred syllables, hiks and hungs, this particular technology. Jigten Sumgön said that since the ox died in a state of delight for Shariputra, who was an enlightened person, he was reborn in a family with great faith in Shariputra, and was later offered to be an attendant monk. Having been taught Dharma by that very noble person, Shariputra himself, he became the great Arhat, Gavampati. This all happened due to the mental imprints of the few words of Dharma in his previous life. And so this is the great power of the Dharma that's hard for us in our worldly way to believe in. But the more we practice, the more we study, certainly the contact that we have with these great teachers, and that contact doesn't have to be physical, It's truly amazing in moments of need, based on the confidence, the prayers, the connections that you've made in mind, that great Lama will be there. It's said that when the student is ready, the Lama appears, and that's really been true for each and every one of us here. No one, I feel quite confident in saying that no one here was going through some sort of, religious list or books or something and said, hey, Drika and Kagyu, that's for me. It just isn't that way. But it's a measure of how vast your aspiration is. Vast and deep. You're touching something deep within your heart, something true. That then something specific, It's like you so desperately want picture on the wall. And lo and behold, no one's thinking about, a drill, a 1/4-inch drill. But it's from that great aspiration of wanting that picture on the wall that the drill appears, just what you need, the tools. And that's what this is. This isn't Drika and Kagyu, everybody else go away. We don't even repeat Drika and Kagyu so much because it's not the point. It's just a method to get beyond Drika and Kagyu. Okay, so that's enough from me this morning. As always, I talk more than I should.